Good evening, and welcome to Kent's Cabaret Theater here in the fantastic Magic Center in Georgetown, Texas. I'm Kent Cummins, and it's my privilege tonight to honor Ron Cartlidge. But this is not the first time that Ron Cartlidge has been honored here on this stage. Let's look.
Well, it's my deep honor, and I mean that sincerely, to present the Magician of the Year Award from IBM Ring 60 this evening. This recipient is a pillar of the magic community in not only Central Texas, but frankly all over the world, certainly all over the United States. He's a member of the Order of Merlin. He had a recent birthday. I think he turned 50. And he's a person who deeply cares about magic, and all I can say is that this award is long overdue. And it's presented by IBM Ring 60 to Ron Cartlidge. Ron, on behalf of the IBM Carl Moore Ring 60, I'd like to present you this Magician of the Year Award for 2020.
So last year, Ron was the Magician of the Year, and this year he's disappeared, he's gone. And as you know, we're holding the traditional broken wand ceremony. It's an interesting tradition. I first really learned about it back in 2005 when Fred Donaldson, the great Scot, passed on, and Judy asked if I would conduct a broken wand ceremony for Fred, and I'd heard of them, but I'd never seen one. I didn't know anything about them. So I started studying and found out that every major magic organization does have some form of this ceremony. And we did that ceremony for Fred, and I didn't think a lot more about it for 14 years. And it was just 3 years ago when my dear friend Mike Winslet, some of you may know him as Squeaky the Clown, died in a tragic house fire. And I got together with Chris, Peter, some of my magician colleagues, and we agreed we needed to hold a celebration of life for him. And as part of that celebration of life, a broken wand ceremony. And I figured, okay, another 14 years, but it was not to be, because in July of that same year, Ramon Galindo passed quietly in his sleep at the age of 99. And his family asked if we would put on a broken wand ceremony. And what had happened after Mike's broken wand ceremony was COVID-19. What happened was that I wasn't supposed to go out into groups. The magic clubs weren't meeting, and so I got to spend a lot of time here turning a townhome into a magic center and a garage into a theater. And so we had the broken wand ceremony here for Ramon. Some of his family and friends were here in person, others virtual via Zoom and YouTube. And we've had over 100 people that were able to watch and enjoy that particular ceremony honoring Ramon. But one of the people who was here in person, of course, was Ron Cartlidge.
About 2 nights ago, I couldn't go to sleep, and thinking about things, and so I decided, well, I'll just reach for a magazine. And this is the one I got picked up, just by coincidence. I opened it up, and it wasn't a magazine, it was a program. And it was about the Texas Association of Magicians and their convention in 2009. And it was dedicated to Senor Ramon Galindo. What really amazed me was there were 18 write-ups from magicians to Ramon. And I'll just read you one. This is the first one in here out of 18. Ramon. My travel buddy. Thanks for all the trip. Shanghai, Beijing, Mexico City, The Hague, London, Paris, Ramon, Innsbruck, Munich, and all those other magic conventions that we attended together. Congratulations on a well-deserved honor. Thank you for all you do for magic. Your friend, Ron Cartlidge. That's me.
Indeed it is, and of course he had more to say, but we wanted just to give you a flavor, and this was now 2019. We knew the pandemic was almost over. We'd already had 2 broken wand ceremonies in 1 year. Certainly things were going to get better. Couldn't wait for 2020. It's in the rearview mirror now. First thing that happened of note here is that Bob Carroll, Ranger Bob, got sick, got very sick, and in fact realized that he was going to die. And during one of our last visits with him, we were actually having a good time with memories, and Bob turned to me and said, "Kent, when I go, will you do the broken wand ceremony?" Of course. And so a 3rd broken wand ceremony in way too long. Actually, his was at the end of 2019, I think, when we actually lost him. Oh my. But they begin to run together, because you're supposed to have 14 years apart, right? You're not supposed to have more than one in 1 year. And you're certainly not supposed to... Oh. I think we have a comment or two from Ron from Bob Carroll's broken wand ceremony, because of course he was here. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron Cartlidge.
Well, it's an interesting story on how I met Doc. There was a hotel that's located at the intersection of Ben White and I-35. And myself, Opie Houston, and
Bob Carroll, maybe?
huh?
Bob Carroll, maybe?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about, Carol. And then, of course, Doc. He was the last one to come into our group. And all of us got identification cards to be in the Sun Club. And so we made it a habit during the week going up to the hotel and sitting in the hot tub and talking about all kinds of things. And so that's kind of how, I don't remember who actually brought Doc into the group, but those were the 4. And what happened was that they had a dressing room for the men and a dressing room for the women. And we'd go in there and change clothes and go get in the hot tub. Well, it just so happened that there was a guy that kept coming back to the dressing room. And the hotel told us that they were having money stolen out of the pockets of the people who were in their health club. And so I don't remember exactly who it was, but somebody from the hotel got us involved in this search for this crook. And we thought we knew who he was. And he would come in there every day and play like he was going to do something, but he didn't. And what happened was that the hotel wanted us to help them to locate this guy when he came into the hotel. And so we did that, and we gave the clue when we saw him come in. And later we found out that the hotel had put invisible, kind of an invisible paint type thing on the lockers so they could catch him if he touched the locker. And so we gave the signal to the hotel, the guy that we thought was crook, and he indeed was, and they indeed caught him. So after he caught him, maybe a day or two later, the hotel came to us, the four guys, and said, "What can we do for y'all? Y'all helped us out to catch this guy." And somebody said, "Well, you don't have anything going on here much on Monday night, do you?" And they said, "No." So they gave us the theater to have our assembly meetings for the Society of American Magicians. And it got to be such a really nice place. It was kind of stair-step level, and they had nice big chairs, and they had a desk kind of thing in front of you. And so that became our home for like 2 to 3 years. And when we'd have a guy come in, like Charles Gotchi from Australia, when he would come in, he would tell us, you know, "I've been to a lot of places and given lectures all over the world, but y'all have the nicest club meeting place of anybody that I've ever been to." So that indeed was what happened, and the four of us were a part of it. And I'll tell you some more stories in a minute, but that's how we kind of got started being together and trying to help the assembly.
And spoiler alert, the next Broken Wand ceremony was for our friend Doc Stan Seaton. Well, it's not surprising. We've had 4 Broken Wand ceremonies within a couple of years here, all hybrid, and they do tend to run together. You feel like we're just losing too many of our friends too often. And of course, Stan Seaton was known by most of you. He always told me that he thought he'd probably live forever. What he actually said was, he says, "Kent, you and I are going to live forever because we take care of ourselves." And I don't think either of us believed it, but it was very sad when we lost him.
It's about Carol say that.
Okay.
In the last couple of years, Bob and I became best friends. I mean, we were best friends. And we did a lot of stuff together. And I recall that Bob, a lot of time, would send me a text or would call me on the programs or something. And if he couldn't find me or couldn't get in touch with me, and he wanted to tell me something that I'd done wrong maybe, or something that I'd done right, but he would call my friends, because he liked all the friends that I had. He would call them and say, "You know where Ron Cartlidge is?" Most of them didn't. But we had a great time the last couple of years as best friends. And let me tell you a little bit about Bob and his magic, because Kent talked to you a little bit about it. But Bob's probably 3 favorite things used to do in magic were coins, cards, and close-up. Stuff that he could do close-up. And I had until this year, a Christmas party every year for 13 years. And I would always get one of my magician friends to be the principal magician and perform at one of my Christmas parties. And not only that, I had a mariachi band come in and perform. My good friend Zeke Castro from Austin High School would bring a group in and perform. It was just a great party. Well, one day at one of the parties, Bob wanted to do some performing, and usually I had one guy who was a stud performer. But Bob said he wanted to perform some of the things that he had been working on. And I had a magic room, not as big as this one. If you ever get a chance to come see this one, you need to come see it. But I had a magic room, and he went in there with another magician, and they performed close-up and card magic and coin magic. And I will tell you this, Bob worked hard to become a good magician. And he became very good at what he did. And he was really good that night at my party. Well, he did the magic, and one of my friends, who some of you may know, Moten Crockett, saw the performance. And he thought, this guy is good. One thing I want to tell you about Bob is that he will be missed. He was a great guy. He did the right things. And Bob, I hope to see you again someday in heaven.
Thank you, Ron. Probably that was a better one to do last. Though it's hard to see. And so finally, we're done with all. No. In 2020, after Doc Seaton passed, Jim Baldoff, a particularly close friend of mine, but a good friend to most of the magic community, passed on. And we had his broken wand ceremony here. And Ron was planning to be right here to say a few words, but that's about the time that his health issues were creating the problems that ultimately caused us to lose him. And so he wasn't able to be here. We don't have a quote from him for that. But it's interesting when you go back and listen to all of the quotes from all of them, certain stories come up again and again, as of course they are expected to. And we have several people here who have some stories they'd like to share. Chris, are you ready?
Sure.
Chris Walden has been the technical guy behind all of these. I wouldn't be able to do a virtual program if it weren't for the tech guy.
So nothing is allowed to break while I'm up here on the stage, because I can't do anything. Ron was just always there. When I got here in 1986, I think he got into the Magic Club a little later, but he feels like he was always there. And where Ron and I connected the most was with the Magic Auction. Because I had stepped in to help with website and photography and things like that. And I remember working with Ron, and he would send me these documents that had all the photos and the information in there, which I would then have to pull out piece by piece and put onto the website because of the technology we were using at that time. I said, Ron, this would work a lot easier if you could put this in a spreadsheet, and then I could just do some copy and pasting. And he said, well, I don't have a spreadsheet. And I said, yeah, you do. It's in there. It's called Excel. He said, I don't see it. And I'm like, well, how about I come over for a visit? And so I came over, and I was gonna say, see, it's this little, you don't have a spreadsheet. Because he was using a home version of Office, and apparently only professional people need the spreadsheet. And so I said, well, I can fix this. And there was an open source Office suite called LibreOffice that I had Kent using for a while, and I've been using for a long time. And it had everything. And so I installed it, I showed him the spreadsheet, and Ron was unstoppable on things. He immediately moved over to keeping the data in the spreadsheet, which was convenient for me, and I was able to do a little bit of foo over to the side so that when he sent me the spreadsheet, it took that information and automatically turned it into the HTML that I needed, so I could just copy that chunk and paste it, and 2 hours of work became 10 minutes of work, which made me like Ron a lot more at the time. But Ron was always so excited about the auction, and that was a really, really big deal to him. He put so much effort into that auction, and I would say was the one that really helped add that world famous Austin Magic auction to it, because he did everything he could to spread it all over the place. Now Ron and I also had another relationship because I spent 1 year as president of Ring 60. That was plenty. Did what I needed to do, rode off into the sunset, let people make up their own stories. But Ron was in the process of trying to raise up SAM Assembly 206 at this point, and he was president of that organization. And Ron's a coach, and you may not know this about Ron, but he had a little bit of a competitive streak in him. And so all of my encounters with Ron for that year were kind of adversarial. He was nice about it, but he was clearly trying to show who was the bigger man there. And he was just so charming about it all. There was a magic auction where we got into a little bidding war over the first item, and I won. And then Ron leaned over and said, "Yeah, I just made him pay $50 for that thing." Oh well. But Ron was always just so nice and so excited. He got so excited about everything that he did. He had such an optimism, and I can imagine what he would have been like as a coach for someone that was trying to figure themselves out. I think he had an optimism and a way of looking at things that was just so beautiful. He was, even when we visited him for the last time, Kent and I went and visited him in the place he was that day. He got moved around a lot the last few weeks. And he was still talking to us about going to the next convention, and he was going to walk out of that place at any moment. And I could see some of the frailty, I could see some of the difficulty he was having, and he absolutely could not. And that was a real strength that Ron had. He could see the way things could be instead of just the way they were. And he was very good at sharing that with everyone that would care to listen. So I miss you, Ron. I really do. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Well, I said when a big project comes up, I call my colleagues, Chris, of course, and Peter Hendricks, Peter the Adequate. I've probably done more projects more often with Peter than any other magician in my 73 years now being a magician. And Peter, I believe you have a few words to say.
Even though Ron and I knew each other for most of the time that we spent together in the Magic Club, I didn't spend a whole lot of time with Ron. One of the reasons I think was that it was during a time where I tried to step away from the clubs a little bit, and when I did show up to the clubs, I would usually spend my time visiting with Sharon because I loved her company at the Magic Clubs. And then then I left Branson for a while. I left for Branson for 10 years. I mean, I left Austin for 10 years to go do a show in Branson, Missouri. And Ron and got a bunch of people together. They organized a trip up to come and see me perform and see all the other magicians perform in Branson. And that was kind of cool. But even then, it was around a bunch of other magicians, so we didn't really get a chance to visit and get to know each other. It wasn't until I decided one year to try to resurrect the magic auction that Ron really kind of sprung into life. And what I learned, something very interesting about Ron, as magicians, we look at all our fellow magicians and assume that their entire world is as engulfed by magic for them as it is for us, and are blissfully unaware that they have a world outside of magic. And Ron most definitely had a world outside of magic. And this was made very clear when he insisted that we go down to a church downtown and asked them if we could have the convention there. Now, he had to have the auction there, and he did run an auction there for a few years, but it had been about 4 or 5 years, and he said, they let me have it for free when I did it. And we're like, well, yes, but you remember that congregation, and that was a while ago. And I said, well, have you been going to the church regularly? He says, no, not as much as I'd like to, but that's okay. I think they still know me. When we walked in there, they met him with open arms. They were so happy to see him, and there was no contract to sign, even though I found out that they had a lengthy contract process. Later on, I found out that it's quite expensive to rent space down there because it is on very valuable property in right downtown Austin, and yet they let us have it for whatever we said we could give them on it. And that's the kind of friendship that Ron would attract with people all over the place. And I learned this also at the Magic Camp because I've had 3 different parents come up to me in the last 6, 7, 8 years, asking me, once they know that I'm involved in magic, asking me if I know Ron Cartlidge. And I go, oh yeah, what do you know for? Oh, he was my coach. Oh, he was my coach. He was my coach. So I've learned about, this amazing life that he had outside of magic. And I had never, I'd heard for many, many years about these amazing Christmas parties he always had. And I was never invited. One year, he invited me and called me twice to make sure I remembered to show up there. And that year, he had asked my friend Cody Fisher to perform for them. And at the end of the party, he came up to me and says, next year, I want you to perform. He never had another party. But the good news is, when I stayed around till really late and got to meet a lot of amazing people, and there were probably only 2 or 3 magicians there. The vast majority of the whole place was packed, and to hear these people go on and on and on about all their connections with Ron and how much he meant to them really taught me a lot about Ron and made me respect him outside of magic as much as I respected him in magic. So we'll miss you, Ron.
Thank you, Peter. And the next person I'd like to share a story is the past president of IBM Ring 60, but also the person who is responsible for the food and drink that we had this evening. Please welcome Trixie Bond.
Thank you. Boy, I feel lucky that for the past 20 years, I was one of Ron's friends. And you know, Ron had a lot of friends. The best part about being one of Ron's friends is that he shared his other friends with you. In fact, at one of his Christmas parties, I met somebody who later, I didn't know, he wasn't a magician, but he later became my friend and is my friend today. His Christmas parties had become an annual ritual. He mailed out these invitations and he kept that RSVP list. And as Peter said, if you didn't RSVP in time, he would call you and say, "What's the matter with you? Are you coming?" His home was over the top with decorations. I think it must have taken him maybe 2 months to put up all those decorations. Maybe another 3 months to take it down, if he took them down at all. Sometimes those little nutcrackers were covered in dust. Those parties were a mix of wonderful friends that came from all walks of life. I mean, there were high school classmates, friendly politicians, fellow magicians, musicians, church, coffee club, Masonic members, and even a 94-year-old descendant of Davy Crockett. That was Moulton. They drive in all over from Texas for his parties. My husband Mark and I were there most of the years, and gosh, we enjoyed meeting his friends and talking with them. Every year, he had the mariachi band and a magician perform. And I, like any of the other magicians that performed, felt very honored to perform at those parties. Being Ron's friend also meant he could talk you into doing things. Like taking over a huge project, the world famous Austin Magic Auction. Yes, he talked me into taking over that auction for a couple of years. What was I thinking? Oh, he helped, yeah. He gave sage advice, and when he was physically able, he would come and help sort the items for auctioning. And for the first couple of years, he would bring his wife, Sharon. Sharon was battling Alzheimer's, and it was obviously challenging for him to deal with her. I really admired the way he cared for her during her declining years. I know he tried to keep her in the best physical condition possible. But Sharon would forget that she'd already eaten. And she liked to eat. Well, Ron did his best, but I guess to keep her away from all the snacks, I guess I'm going to confess now it's safe. I used to sneak Sharon some brownies or cookies at those magic functions because it made her really happy. Before his computer died, or he didn't use it anymore, and when he would answer his phone, he was really a good communicator. He liked to write. Obviously, he wrote 2 books on that were very successful on the history of Houdini in Texas. But he would write these emails out to everyone, lengthy blogs about Sharon and his life, and it was pretty interesting. Well, recently he wasn't so good about answering the phone, or many of my calls and voicemails went unanswered. Yet he would call me at random times to give me an update on his life, or where he had moved to, or where he was moving next. The last time I saw Ron is when I picked him up for an it was SAM meeting in July. I arrived a little earlier than we had agreed to, and I can just picture him sitting on the curb out in front of Brookdale. There, he was there rehabbing, and he had on this straw cowboy hat, this pink shirt, and he had a little bag with a gift for the Christmas in July magic party. He was so excited to attend, and we talked that entire drive to the meeting, which was about 30-40 minutes. And he told me about his plans to attend the Society of American Magicians convention, which was in January of this year. And I mistakenly questioned him if he really thought that was a good idea and whether he was capable. Wow, did I get a pushback on that comment? He was raring to go. And I also told him, since I didn't think it was possible for him to have another Christmas party at his house in 2021, maybe we should look at Brookdale, and I'd be glad to help him with this party because I enjoyed doing that. Well, I think just offering to help and letting him dream about another party, it lifted his spirits almost as much as attending that magic meeting that night in July. Ron was a prince and a real gentle man. I'll miss him. I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Thank you, Trixie. Past president of IBM Ring 60, and we happen to have the past president of the Society of American Magicians Assembly 206 here as well. And when I say past president, almost every magician in Austin has been a past president. But I'm talking about the immediate past presidents, in this case, Bertil Fredström.
Hey. So I was the president of SAM 206 last year when we lost Ron. And every single speaker here has mentioned things that I did with Ron. I was with Ron in Mexico City together with Ramon Galindo. I was with Ron in Beijing. Ron and I have been traveling a lot together, and they've been sharing a lot of rooms together. When the World Championship of Magic was in Stockholm, he stayed with me, stayed in my house for the whole convention. And he's been a fantastic travel partner. He was also, as you say, a little competitive. I had a Christmas party in December from the first year I moved to Austin, which was 1998, every year. And then one year Ron contacted me and said, hey, I would like to have a Christmas party. What date are you having yours? And we were negotiating so we wouldn't clash. And that was the same thing every year after that. When are you gonna have yours? Oh, I've decided my date. You can't take that. And it always worked out. And one year he asked me to be the magician at his Christmas party, and of course I did that. And none of us have had any Christmas parties for the last 2 years, for obvious reasons. He also liked to travel with me because we both had this idea of maybe we can save a little money if we don't stay at the convention hotel. Because the convention hotel have a special rate, $150 per night. But if Ron and I were to rent a motel room 5 minutes away, you can get a room for $70 per night. And he liked to save a little money now and then. So he called me up maybe 3 months ago and he said, hey, can we share a room in Las Vegas in January? The Magic Convention, the SAM convention that is going to be there in January. And I had seen him, I visited with Kent, I knew that he was in and out of hospitals, but I couldn't say, no, I don't think we can do that. I said, of course. So he said, yeah, okay, I'll get back to you, but we can start planning it now. And then he called me back and he started booking his airline tickets. And when are you leaving? When are you coming? What date should we have the hotel from? And it turned out we're going to be there for 5 nights. So we negotiated and I ended up having to pay for 3 nights and he would pay for 2. That was a fair deal. And then he called me up and he was so proud because he had now booked his airline ticket. And I said, I don't think you can beat my price. I got a return ticket for $70 for Las Vegas. And he said, ha, I'm paying 18. And then his last call to me, and people told me that, he's not really there, you can't really expect him to be very organized, and don't count on him showing up in Las Vegas. But I actually asked Chris to play his last voicemail to me, and you can hear in his voice that he knew what he was doing. Do we have that, Chris?
Okay, Bertle, this is Ron Cartlidge, and I have one change on what we were talking about. But let me see if I can give you what I've got now. Here we go. Let's see. Depart Austin on January the 14th at 12:35 p.m. Arriving in Las Vegas at 3:35 p.m. on a one-stop flight. Now, the one coming home is going to be new. You haven't heard this one. But it's a lot better for me, I'll tell you that. Return Las Vegas to Austin on January the 19th, Wednesday. Taking off at 9 a.m. and arriving in Austin at 1:35 p.m. So that's the new flight. That's a lot better for me. The other flight that I had, it was like 7 hours. This one's like 2 hours and 35 minutes. So that's my schedule, and I'm going to give you my confirmation number. Just in case something happens. Here it is. Okay, here's my confirmation number, Bertle. It is number signed 2. U is in Utah. S is in Sam. G is in Goodnight. W is in Waco. And N is in Nancy. That's my confirmation number, so we are set to go in January. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. Any questions, give me a call.
That was his last message to me, and of course, just a few weeks later, he was gone, and I couldn't believe it. And I just came back from the Magic Convention, and they had the information that he had passed. So every year they do a walk through all the great magicians that have passed during the year, and he was part of that list. So everybody saw his name and heard it and paid their tributes to it. And Ron, you win. You left me with the bill for the hotel.
I had to invite all these people up to speak, or I would spend the hour telling Ron stories. So many of them, like when he talked me into going to the Yankee gathering in Boston, and he was driving, and that was a few years ago, and I promised myself I wasn't ever going to drive myself because of my vision, or with Ron because he was Ron. But we made it safely out, and as a matter of fact, one of my favorite moments was when we were in the dealer's room. I was selling some posters. He was selling, of course, his books, and on the table in the front room, you may have seen the photo in the corner of him just smiling like crazy with his table full of books that he was selling at the convention. But the story that I have to tell you has to do with this. Carolyn, I didn't ask you, I didn't warn you, but would you consider coming up and helping me? My daughter, Carolyn, and she almost made a living as a beautiful assistant for a number of years. So, it seems like the appropriate Okay. When John Calvert, one of the most respected magicians ever, was coming to Austin, I was given the opportunity to be the master of ceremonies. And Ron was in the audience, of course, and he came to me before the show. He says, Kent, do you have a handkerchief I could borrow? Yeah, I always carry a handkerchief. Yeah, sure. So I loaned him the handkerchief, and then things happened and the show started and whatever, and then John Calvert says, and now I need to borrow a white gentleman's handkerchief. And Ron says, right here, and hands it to him, and he does the dancing handkerchief beautifully. And then after the show, Ron got it autographed, framed it, put up photos, and I said, Ron, you did a beautiful job of framing my handkerchief. I don't mind at all if it hangs in your room for a little while before you give it back to me. And of course I was kidding, and of course he laughed and I laughed, and it's bittersweet that now I have it back. It is my handkerchief.
And he didn't even clean it.
I know. Thank you, Carolyn. And it's good that Carolyn's here because she's the subject of my last story, which is yesterday afternoon, I think somewhere around 3 o'clock, I thought, we don't have a souvenir to give to people for the ceremony. We usually have some kind of a souvenir. And I realized that the family had been very generous. They had found some boxes of his Houdini books, and they said, anybody that comes can have one of those books, because we'll never sell all those in the estate sale. I mean, that's and that way they'll go to people that really care, which is very generous and very appreciated. And I thought, but there need a bookmark. Ron was known primarily as an author among the magic community. Of course, a bookmark. The session is tomorrow. Carolyn, are you busy? What do you need, Dad? Well, I had this great idea that we should have a bookmark souvenir for Ron. Send me the image and the copy, Dad. And I did. And she created the bookmark souvenir that you have. And she sent it to Robert's Printing. And middle of the morning this morning, I got a call saying, pick up your bookmarks. And so you do have a nice souvenir. Those of you that are watching on Zoom or on YouTube, if you'd like one of the things, just send me an email, kent@magichotline.com. That's Kent, K-E-N-T, like Clark Kent, @magichotline, no punctuation, .com. And include your snail mail address so I can put this in an envelope and send it to you. Those that are here, of course, have one in front of you. If you know someone, you're going to see someone that you think would like one, there are a few extras on the table. And thanks to Ron's kids, you're still kids to me, and to Ron, everybody gets a copy of his book, and pick up a bookmark on your way. Thank you so much. Now, it's time for the ceremony itself.
Before that,
Yes.
Ken, we do have some viewers on Zoom.
Oh, excellent.
If someone would like to speak, if you'll just unmute your microphone. Thomas looks like he is raising his hand there, and you'll be able to share your story with everybody. Everyone can hear you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Ron came into my life probably 20-something years ago when I was doing National Magic Week. He was so proud of the work he did to get the assembly involved with Magic Week. And then lo and behold, I got to come to Austin. And I think that might have been my first meeting with Ron. As opposed to emails back and forth and proclamations and different activities and trying to get a Houdini stamp. And of course, he had all kinds of stories. And once I got to Austin, he was no longer the Ron in an email. And now that I find out he was a coach, I will tell you, he was probably best at being a cheerleader. He had all kinds of angles and all kinds of connections and all kinds of knowledge. A buddy of mine got not really stranded in Philadelphia, but we got turned around and we were questioning whether or not we were going to get a cab. These were before the days of Uber. And I see this figure way off in the distance and he's pulling a suitcase. And I said, I think that's Ron Cartlidge. Sure enough, I'm waving to him over and I say, hey, Ron, how you getting to the hotel? This might have been Philadelphia convention about 8-10 years ago. And I said, you taking a taxi? I said, you got somebody picking you up? He goes, I'm taking a bus. I said, where do you get? He said, right here. So we drag our suitcases over and sure enough, the bus let us off like 2 blocks away from where we're supposed to be. But that was Ron. Always had another out, always had suggestions, always had his hand out to help you. It was so great to know the man and to see his friends. And I got to tell you, if I may, I'd like to do a little retro on Ramon Galindo. He crossed paths with one of our assembly members, Ron Morrison. They both did birds. And every time I saw Ramon, he would ask me about Ron. And every time I saw Ron, he would ask me if I seen Ramon in my travels. So it's amazing how we all connect. And we're so interactive with magic, with our lives, with each other. And I'm so glad you thought of putting this out there and doing the Zoom situation. And Ron, safe travels, buddy. I miss you. Thank you. And I look forward to that bookmark. And maybe a book. Kent, you know where I am.
If there's anyone else on Zoom that would like to speak, just raise your hand, or you can just unmute your microphone and jump on in there.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words about Ron. I met Ron sometime around 2008. I was very late to Magic. And he was one of the first people that approached me when I came to one of the first meetings, him and Kent, and the regulars and the well-known names within the club. And no time at all, somehow I ended up working with the board. And he just had a way of encouraging people to do things for the SAM. And he was very, very dedicated with it. It was fun working with him at his house, putting the items together for the magic auction. And he was always supportive and coming up with ideas and ways to get around any problem you could run into. It was just a delight to be around the guy. He was always bright and uplifting and never had really much of a bad word to say about anybody. But if anybody got into a bind, he was there to help them out. And that's what really attracted me to Ron, was his really friendly and loving nature. He was a great guy. It was fun to work with, and I wish I had an opportunity to be with him more often, but it just didn't work out that way.
All right, thank you so much, Dan. And is there anyone else on Zoom that would like to speak about Ron? We'll just have a moment of silence as we all think about our own memories of Ron. Oh, I see a hand there. Mr. Manis. Just unmute yourself.
I think we ought to give Ron a standing ovation.
With you.
We will have a standing ovation for Ron at the end of the ceremony as part of the broken wand.
Thank you.
If there's anyone else that wants to say something, just unmute yourself. All right, back to you, Kent.
All right. You probably know that Ron loved wearing garish ties. And when Margot found out, my wife found out I was coming, she says, "You need to wear your Bugs Bunny tie, because that'd be appropriate." I said, "That's not appropriate with a tux. And besides that, that doesn't look like what Ron would wear. This looks like what Ron would wear." But again, this is a tux shirt. So I hope you can appreciate. Ron, I chose these socks just for you. Now, I didn't realize until I started looking at the history. Tonight is the 7th Broken Wand ceremony that I have officiated. And the first, the great Scott and Judy, I was looking at the script, and the person who prepared the wand was Chris Walden. And he has prepared the wand for each of the 6 ceremonies since. Chris, do you have the wand for us? Thank you. The magic wand. A symbol of the magician's art, but so are top hats, but lots of people have been known to wear top hats. Rabbits you see lots of places. Playing cards, and everybody has playing cards. Coins, cards, the silks, all of these things are used by so many people, but only the magic wand is unique to the conjurer's art. Only a magician wields a magic wand. But without the magician to wield it, it has no magic. It's just, once more, a stick. I'll present these to Justin and Jennifer as a memory of their dad and his love of magic. And we have what I think will be a treat for you at the end of the ceremony. Stay tuned. We have Ron's keynote presentation. It's 23 minutes, and it's him telling everything that we wanted to tell you about Ron. You saw at the very start of the ceremony where he received the Magician of the Year award. He was asked to speak at that so that he'd for sure be there, because he didn't know that he was going to get that award. But that presentation was so fascinating. And as I say, during that 23 minutes, he not only tells how and why each book and article got produced and why and how, but he tells stories about himself and his friends that are just fun to listen to. And so that will be our epilogue for the ceremony. But when a magician stops performing, if the audience liked what they saw, they'll applaud. But if the audience was inspired, then often the audience will rise to their feet and give that magician a standing ovation on YouTube, on Zoom, and of course, all of us here. This is for you, Ron. We love you. We miss you. That concludes the official ceremony, but let's watch a little bit more of Ron.
Well, it is my privilege to introduce our speaker tonight, who is our local Houdini aficionado, who literally wrote the book on Harry Houdini. So without any further ado, let's introduce Ron Cartlidge.
I think I have 10 minutes, but I'm not sure. I'll probably go a little bit over that. And what I'm going to talk about first is I have a lot of people at Brookdale and all over the city of Austin say, how in the world did you get to be an author? And it all started out, I guess, in high school. attended Austin High School, and I invited the lady who sat in front of me, lives in New Orleans now, and we used to talk back and forth, probably too much. And so in our English class, each one of us got an F. So we both went to summer school, and we graduated from Austin High School. And later on, when I saw her, matter of fact, I invited her to this meeting tonight, since she lives in Round Rock, and I think she's probably too embarrassed to attend. But she said, wouldn't our English teacher be surprised if they could see us today? And I've done quite a few things that you can see. I'm not only talk about Houdini, but I'm going to talk about some other magicians who I have written articles about and things like that. I was in my early years, I was a member of the JCs in Austin, Texas, and one of my first jobs was to do a newsletter every week. And that newsletter did real well, it got an award and everything, and that kept helping me. Everything that I know, almost everything, let's put it that way, I learned in the JCs how to be a leader. And after that, I came up with an idea. I'm thinking about what can I do, and I'm thinking about the world's greatest magician, or at least the one that's known the most, and that was Harry Houdini. So I started doing some research on Houdini. Houdini had never been to Texas as far as anybody knew. So I started doing research on that, and this is what I did first. I went to libraries in the big cities, and I would get their newspaper back issues. And that's where I got my information from to write this book. And I also went to the greatest magic collection maybe in the United States or in the world at the Ransom Center. And I would go in there and I'd study it because they had all kinds of stuff in there on Houdini. And I finally did this book and did a hardbound book, and did it University of Texas, Orange. And on the front, I had a photograph of Houdini. I changed it up a little bit. Up on the wall up here is a poster, and it was with Houdini and his wife. Well, I took that off, and I put the state of Texas up there because nobody knew he'd ever been to Texas. So the first thing that came out on it was Houdini's Texas tours, 1916 and 1923. And I printed about 500 of these books, and I didn't print it until I got out of New York City, because I don't know whether it was the SAM or the IBM. I think it was the SAM that was having a convention in New York City. And I wasn't quite ready with this book. I'd hoped I had it to produce it there, but it didn't work. So I got to go to Houdini's graveside. I got to go to Houdini's home and took pictures of that and other things. And I got them. This was when the Houdini stamp was put out. The United States did this, but I had them. They were selling stamps at the convention. I had them stamp my book, and then on the inside, I had them stamp the book again here on the inside, and then I printed 52 editions that were special editions. 52 of them. That's it. And there were probably maybe 500 of these printed. In 2 weeks, these books, I sold them for $25 at the time. And in 2 weeks, they were selling for $500. $400, I believe it was, on eBay. And so anyway, the difference was
President's Award meeting that I was supposed to be at tonight.
Well, let me tell you first about this. I had a lot of that Houdini said of its people on the back of it, and they were very pleasing. And the biggest thing about this book was I learned where Houdini performed. And in 1916 and 1923, he performed in the major cities of Texas. That was Austin, Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, and Fort Worth. Those were the cities he performed, and they were the larger cities. After I published this, it became pretty well known. I was invited to go to Atlanta to do a speech on Houdini, and that was interesting. But I figured, what else could I do, after I'd done a book like that? And I came out with a book called The Blue Book of Magic. And I'm going to pass this around and let you look at it. It was in 2005, and this was my first one. I did 5 of them before I got too tired and didn't do it anymore. But what was the guys, the poster guy out in Las Vegas that has the most posters out of Norm Nielsen. Norm Nielsen was the first one to come by this thing every year. And it was, this one says it was a new and improved edition. And I made it blue because it was the Blue Book of Magic. But later on, I'll show you another one that I did. But this is everything in magic that you can think of. I even did eBay France, eBay England, and I bought a card. I bought a Houdini card off of eBay France for $10, and it was sent to his wife, and it was signed by Harry Houdini, and nobody bid on it because they thought it was a fake. I knew it wasn't a fake because there was a postcard there that had the postal markings on it. So I got that for $10, and it took a little while to get it, but I did get it. And this was the second one. Let me just pass this one around so you can take a look at it. And everybody seemed to enjoy that book too. People keep asking me, well, let me tell you, when I wrote the book on Houdini, I had a phone call from a friend of mine in San Antonio. His name was Claude Crow. Probably some of y'all know him. And he called me up and he said, Ron, he said, did you know that Houdini was in Denton, Texas in 1924? I said, Claude, if I'd have known, it'd have been in my book. So I had to start searching Houdini again. And this was the greatest thing because I went back to Fort Worth and found out that Houdini had performed in a Ku Klux Klan auditorium. Wow. Now what's surprising about that is, if you don't know, Houdini was Jewish. And the Klan didn't like the Jews. So it's my opinion that the 2 guys that opened up the show and everything rented the theater, and Houdini had no idea what it was when he went in there, but he still performed there. And this one is Houdini. This one I put out, I did 26 issues of it, And when I told you about Atlanta a while ago, I did it for Atlanta. And I took the 26 issues down there, and I kept one of them because I just wanted to have one in case I did it again or something. And I sold all 25 of them there, and guys that I knew were Houdini authors were buying this book. And then after that, I had all kinds of calls and things and over the internet. And but this one was much different than this one down here. He did not perform in all the major cities in 1924. He did a lot of the small towns, like I said, Denton. I even went to Denton. That's where I found out all this information. It started, and he performed in Denton and Sherman and Waco and places like that. So he still performed in Fort Worth on this one, but he performed in the smaller towns. That's what the difference is in 1924. And this is also called as Houdini's Final Tour in Texas. Do the dead speak to the living? And that was when he was debunking all these people that were trying to bring people back from the dead and all that kind of stuff. And it's mentioned in that book. That's what he did pretty much on his tour. He talked about spiritualism and how that happens and things like that. And then here in Austin, I just did an article in this book. But this was a book that our Magic Club did. And some of you probably don't remember, but it was called the Saturday Morning Session. And I'm glad I found this book in my collection because I put a trick in here and I forgot how to do it. And so the first one in the book, this was our card trick group. And this is the people who were performing back there. Queen Elizabeth, that was my trick. Ron Cartlidge. And the other people were Roger Gorse, Lou Horning, Carlos Santillan, Terrell Fisher, Kent Cummins. Kent Cummins did too. Brad Henderson, Mike Brewer, Albert Lucio, and I think that's it. But that was a neat deal. I didn't do this, I didn't put this together, I just put an article in it. Albert came up with the idea, and so that's why we published it. And the next ones, these all have, this one was from, this is a Yankee Magic Collector. And it's a convention they have in Massachusetts each year. And I've got to tell you, it's the best convention I've ever gone to. They have shows, they have flea markets, and all kinds of things. And they have super magicians come in there to perform. But the Yankee Gathering is what it's called, or the New England Magic Collectors Association is what it actually is. And this was the first one that I went to, so there's nothing in there by me. But this one, this is the 12th edition, and this one has nothing to do with Houdini. I did an article on Harry Keller for this book, and this was my first time to participate in it. The people had been doing this for at least 12 years, and it was pretty interesting. The article I wrote was Harry Keller, the first goodwill ambassador to Texas. And you might sound like, if you know who Harry Keller was, that's pretty funny that he would be in Texas. But he went into Mexico and then covered wagons and things, came through Mexico and up to the United States, well, actually up to Texas, and he performed in Texas on that tour.
Did he perform in Austin?
Huh?
Did he perform in
I
Austin?
don't think he did. I don't think he did perform in Austin. I think he skirted that and performed out in the west a little bit. And then this one is the next one. This is 13. Same thing, the Magic Collector. This one, this is an interesting. This one I found somewhere and wrote it up. And this lady was from Ohio. It's called Hope Eden, the world's largest, Hope Eden, the world's smallest mentalism, or mentalist. And she was probably 4'6" or something like that. I mean, she was a tiny lady. But she performed in Ohio, and she performed at one of the big conventions up there. And this one I have an article in, and this is where they get a little nicer. They put up here who the author is, and they present them one of the books.
Wow.
This is number 16. This is interesting. This was an article I wrote. I'm getting, I put several articles in the books already, so I'm getting a little tired, I guess. So I go to the Ransom Center. And I see what I can find there. And this article is on boxes 7 through 9 and box number 19. And they had all kinds of interesting stuff in those boxes. And it wasn't just Houdini, but it was other magicians too. And what I was trying to do was to get them, the people in Massachusetts, to come down here and explore this great collection we have at the Ransom Center. Now this is one of the most important ones right here. Might not be the most important one, but there's a point. I should have put it in there. It may be that one. But there was a guy, another magician in Austin, and I told him, I said, why don't you go up here with me to this magic collection thing? I said, I'm telling you, it is super, super good. And he said, well, I don't know, how are we going to get up there? I said, we're going to fly, and I'm going to rent a car, and I'll take you over to the convention. And you can't beat that, and I've got points for the room, most of it anyway, 2/3 of the room. So he finally said, okay, I'll go with you. You know who that is?
I do know who that is because I told Margot, said, Ron wants me to go to this collector's convention, and I love magic collecting, but I don't know, it's going to cost money, it's going to take time. She says, this will be a chance to really enjoy some time with your friend Ron. You should go. So I do what my wife tells me. She said I should go to the convention. I'm so glad I did. We had a great time.
Yeah, and we're still writing for articles in the book.
What year was that?
And this one, the one I wrote about was called the Glen Game, which was the show that he did and what happened in it and all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you another thing, you got to keep an eye on the University of Texas. They had a play over there not too long ago, I mean, maybe 3 years or 4 years ago, and they had people come in and perform as Houdini and his sidekick and stuff like that, and maybe his wife, I don't remember now. But that was really good, so I enjoyed doing this. And the other one in this book is called Houdini's 1986 Tour of Canada. I never heard about Houdini in Canada. And it's by Cummins, Silver Star. And so that started him on the track. And up until this virus came up and everything, we continued to be in there. Well, how many have you written? 3?
2.
2? He had 2 articles in there, and as you can see, I've had a bunch. This one is from, this is 19. Oh, this is the one, this is a recent one. This one was this, yeah, you wrote one this year, didn't you?
Right.
Okay, so is that only 2 that you've done?
Yep.
Okay, so he wrote one this time too, and this one, it was hard getting it in because we didn't even know if there was going to be one, but I sent him this article like 2 years ago. Houdini and David Devant. David Devant, if you don't know, is an English magician, and it talks about their friendship. So I had to read about when Houdini was over in Europe, and when he was, David Devant, I believe it's from England, so I was enjoying the book too. But Kent and I have been writing articles, and we'll probably continue to as long as we can. We know the people who comes, the people that are the guy that was the editor, I guess, and so we've had a good time doing it. But that's my thing. It's been fun.
And if you didn't notice, the person who introduced him at the start, that was Ray Anderson from Esther's Follies. The reason that's so important is that Ray and his partner moved out to Driftwood somewhere and were completely staying away from anybody and everybody during the pandemic. And when he heard that Ron was being honored, he said, I have to be there. And so he made the trip all the way, despite all of the other problems and concerns, because it was important to him to be here to honor Ron. You probably also heard his voice asking one of the questions about Keller in the middle of the presentation. Most of the books that he just told you about are on display on the table out there. I don't have all of the Yankee collector volumes, but I do have the 2 that have my story in them, and they also have a story from Ron in each of those 2. So I put a Ron bookmark by his story and a Kent bookmark by my story if you want to look at those any more. If anybody would like more food and drink, there's still some available. There is no reason why you have to hurry. Certainly mingle stay. If you'd like a quick tour of the entire facility, just let me know. If you have any questions or problems, I'm so sorry. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.